Hoodie, welcome. How's it going? I wanted to do these check-ins as they seem to be a little bit more helpful than the old-fashioned way, um, which is strictly in um, kind of a robotic class where you click through things. Our class, and I inherited this shell. So bear with me on it, but the main things to look at, and I know your view is different. There's course activities. We do have assignments and discussions. Because it's mostly papers, there are no quizzes. Um, for the social work licensure exam, I was going to try to pass along answers and explanations. If you're interested, just email me that you would like to see some of those. That's a licensure prep. But today I wanted to really get into everything and introduce myself. I know to get into the syllabus, you've got to click through and do content. So it says that there's 6 syllabuses. I'm hoping not all of those are visible to you. And it does look like they're not. Mine, I did date the first day of class, which was like Sunday at midnight. And here's what I have. So my name is John Trouth. I've worked in social work for 23 years now. So did my MSW at the University of Kentucky, and I went on for my doctorate in counseling at the University of Cincinnati. So I stayed pretty local here if you are a Centrillian. I've been teaching since before the pandemic. So 2019 at Central, began full-time after my doctorate in 2016 at NKU with 2 years at Miami University, which is about 35 miles from here. My workplace has been mostly addictions at first. So in the late 1990s, I got into specifically addictions with my psychology degree. I found out quickly it would have helped to do social work in undergraduate because in an accredited program, you get to skip a whole year of graduate school. So Central being accredited, you qualify for the advanced standing master of social work, which is only 1 year, 30 hours instead of 2 calendar years, and often 65 hours. So here is some of my contact stuff. Obviously, being online, I just literally got certified to teach online this May. So class starting May 21st. It's only been a few weeks. Social welfare, I do have the PowerPoint I want to start with, but showing you the other 2 assignments besides the intro discussion and 2 other discussions first, because we do move quickly with summer classes. It can sometimes be as many as twice as fast. So you're used to a 16 or 17 work fall and spring semester. Summers, they often only do like 9 or 10 weeks. So that's what we're working with, and that's okay. It just means the papers are due sooner than they normally would be in the semester. Attendance, that is going to be your introduction discussion. So I made sure that was visible to everybody. I've seen some of you have started that. Some of the work, if you have a disability, contact the Office for Disability. So you see that in the middle of the syllabus. And then with grading, there is those 3 major assignments. So generally, I am okay with you rewriting. Like if there's something that you needed to fix, I'll let you know. If it looks good, you're going to have an A. So I can start the way my doctoral professor began. She said, everyone starts with an A in the very first day of class. So you can only like work your way away from the A. But starting out, we all have an A. Introduce yourself for attendance. And we got a couple weeks for the first paper. And that's what I wanted to show you on this. we do have, because we are online, I am not doing the group projects. Um, we have the final, and then the papers. If you prefer to write it up in a presentation and submit it to me, like pre-recorded, or if you request a Zoom session to present to the whole class, I am open to that for one of the papers. I obviously want you to do differently for the other papers. So here's what the first one looks like. And if I'm able to zoom a little bit at least, it's called the Individual Social Welfare Topic paper, and it's in your syllabus. So these can be, I'd prefer journal articles. It does say newspaper and magazines because sometimes that's how we first get the news. My only concern is that if it's not a peer reviewed article, it could have some spin onto it. Like if you just Google an article or search, even Yahoo nowadays, people said use Bing or DuckDuckGo, but ideally journal articles. And here are the different things to write your paper on. And it's unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, contributions of the American business to retirement planning, public assistance programs, temporary assistance for the needy families, and that got big during COVID. So there is one huge intersection with this class is when COVID happened, we had a huge, large amount of stimulus put into the government, which caused such crazy inflation right now. If you've seen rentals or car payments or purchase of anything with an interest rate of 7, 9, or 10%, you see what I'm talking about. So some of the supplemental insurances aren't covering it. So it might actually have to be direct from the food bank. If you're in a layoff situation, you get help from the food bank. Food stamps would also be helpful, but if food has gone up by a large percentage in price, sometimes you can only buy 2.5 weeks of food instead of the usual 3, and most folks would go to the food pantry on the 3rd week to make it through the month. Here are some of the other programs, though. The TANF, Supplemental Security Income, Medicare and Medicaid, which honestly, as a social worker, a large amount of our funding comes from billing Medicare and Medicaid. There are some food and shelter programs and public housing, Section 8, that you could write on. So if you want your paper just on one of these topics, that's fine. If you think some of them run together and want to include 2, that's great too. Last thing is current shelter issues. So the homeless, publicly funded program, and social welfare, and then other services in the nonprofit sector. So that is kind of to get you an idea of the first paper, which I know seems to come quickly because we don't have as much time as we normally do in a full semester. Summer is always accelerated, it seems. So after you pick your topic, those are the topics. Here's the instructions. The paper should discuss the chosen social welfare topic, as well as thoughtfully and thoroughly explore how it's a matter of social welfare and how social workers should handle the issue such as that within their social work practice. So those are 3 good columns. First, discuss the social welfare topic. You could use articles and citations, then thoughtfully explore how it's a matter of social welfare. Obviously, basic needs are a huge one. So food, water, shelter, security, healthcare now. The Affordable Care Act is a huge one we've had recently, and that's how more social work jobs have opened up through billing Medicare, Medicaid. And then use APA. So every program you do will require APA, and also in graduate school. The easiest place to check your work is at Purdue OWL for citations. A lot of times it lets you type in, if you had a web address, it'll show you how to cite it. I still like Google Scholar. So if you go into scholar.google.com, it shows you exactly how to cite different things. Um, do 12-point font, spelling and grammar check. I'm okay if you use Courier New. I know that makes your paper spread out a little more. It like turns a 2-page paper into a 3-page paper, but it helps me for reading with my dyslexia. Um, Courier New is almost like a typewriter font. Cover sheet, that's APA, so it'll just have like name, date, title, and school that you're in. Student's name, date, 4 pages, top to bottom, not including cover sheet. So really, it's 5. And if you had references, it could be 6. And then it says papers should include at least 3 reputable sources. And that's where you go to Google, scholar.google.com. I'll show you that quickly. So here is Scholar, and here's how you would cite for Scholar. It is, say you are citing my publication from a few days ago, or a few years ago, sorry. Go into Scholar and type that, and there's APA. So it's very simple, and you just alphabetize it, or you do social welfare policy, Medicare. So, and there's articles you can, what I like about this is you can say only articles the past 4 years or the past 2 years right here. And then again, when you cite it, you click on this, there's APA. So that's for your citations at the end. The paper should include presentation that will be presented to the class. So this is where I'm saying if you'd prefer to do one of your papers that way, and because we're not in person, I could have you Zoom. I could call out Zoom and have you present it, or you could do a voiceover and share it. So your choice overall, it should cover what you're talking about in this individual social welfare topic paper. That is the first paper. The second one will be about 2/3 in. It's more about social justice topic paper. Examples are like child labor, clean water, food, shelter, human dignity, how poverty affects human rights, exploitation of children, human trafficking, which I've got quite a large amount documentary on, the right to adequate health care, how climate change impacts developing countries, racial profiling, adequate to access to adequate food and nutrition. So food deserts, poverty and inequality, access to education, censorship, rewriting history, landfills, even the proximity of the homes to the poor, industrial air pollution, how it affects the poorest and vulnerable, medical experimentation. So again, this is for the second paper, but I wanted you to have both of those assignments. We've got the 2 discussions in there already. And then the final. So being that I can only take attendance if you type in or if you show up in person, I am here every day. I realize some of you are out of state, but you're welcome to come. Mornings, mostly Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then afternoons are Wednesday and Friday. So that is all of those for the topics. And I did want to get through some of this. So social policy and poverty. So there were 3 discoveries of poverty. Lester Ward suggested that restraining power is needed to regulate the conduct of individuals towards one another. See if the presentation view works for you guys. Wow, that made it weird. Okay. Well, still weird. And then prevent the wholesale exploitation of the weak and the strong. So making sure that ideally there's not too much power for folks. And that we get to vote on things. if you ever do any studies in liberation theology and like Catholic social teaching or Christian-based communities, I lived in El Salvador and Nicaragua for a long time. And this is where some of it came from. Social gospel stated that no person can be redeemed and saved alone. God hates injustice, and the kingdom of God is the real solution. This is early 18 and 1900s America. So that's where it came from. The first discovery in the progressive era was there was reform in business and politics. There was a belief that poverty was a result of the structure of society, and it could be fixed by people and the government. So notice it does say people first and the government second. So kind of a combination of the two. The fading of the first discovery. This was in 1921. It's a federal program to provide grants to states to develop preventative health services for mothers and children. So this is the start of social work. Social work began in the early 1900s. And so legislation by the people was pushed through by the 1920s. And I know that was another stimulus era. If you've ever heard of the Roaring Twenties, that's when America printed a lot of money. Although the problem in 1921 is that money was still gold and silver. They did use like a paper note that said this represents 1 ounce of silver. $1 was 1 ounce of silver. And a paper note for gold was this represents a $20 bill is $20 was 1 ounce of gold from 1921 until the Great Depression. So this was to combat the high maternal and infant death rates. So again, kind of the social work infusing itself into some of that. And making sure sorry about that. We have several grants. So speaking of money, this is how some of the setup goes. We did several to request horticulture therapy at Central State this summer. And we edited some grants in the budget to meet the needs of our students. Also, we have a grant for scholarships. So the government was forced to act in the Great Depression. This is where things became difficult. We have several. President Hoover initially thought a return of confidence would correct the failing economy, and it didn't so much. So after that failed, he supported federal loans to states for their relief efforts. So the Great Depression was definitely rough and challenging for folks. The government was forced to act because of the massive amounts of unemployed. Like we had lines out the door. So the Depression did not end until the 40s. So we had the New Deal era. That was initiated by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And that was to counteract the Great Depression. It was marked by large amounts of legislation and the establishment of new programs. So you saw a lot of work on, in the 40s, they started federal highways, so like the interstate systems to ship goods quickly. It was during World War II. They wanted to make sure things could be shipped around and gotten places. Now, by 1960, we had the third discovery. The key to poverty was thought to be lack of opportunity. So strategies chosen to deal with poverty focused on services and opportunities for self-advancement. That followed with our war on poverty. So the highlights from President Johnson's Great Society program was we had the Economic Opportunity Act, and that was 1964, the year we finally started taking silver out of the money. I know that sounds like a strange connection, but the only way to fund some of these was to print more money, and that was the Federal Reserve that were introduced to early on. I believe it was in 1912. I think they realized we couldn't dig enough gold and silver out of the ground to back everything. So we literally took the silver out of money. And you'll notice that dimes from 1964 are 90% silver, but in 1965, they are made of a different like metal, zinc or copper or a mixture. We also had Medicare and Medicaid, the Voting Rights Act, developmental assistance for Appalachia, highway beautification, the Head Start program, and that strengthened the legitimacy of early intervention. We even redid that in 95, 30 years later with the Clintons. Supported the value of daycare, improved nutrition and health for the young, and enhanced parental involvement in education. Then for a while, there was skirmish against poverty. So the Supplemental Security Income Program in 72 replaced the former state-run Old Age Assistance Aid to the Blind, also Aid to the Permanently Disabled programs. That's when we had a big deinstitutionalization. I have a few videos on that. I will either try to show you here live, or if YouTube cuts it out, I'll put a link in so that it can be watched on your own time. So the skirmish against poverty, Title 20 of the Social Security Act, that was in 75. It gave more flexibility to states in designing their social service programs. And then there was the Earned Income Tax Credit, 1975, and that provided cash supplements for working parents with relatively low incomes. So, as you see here, by the 70s, all of the money was replaced with a petrodollar. So instead of gold and silver backing our current money supply, it became a petrodollar, which only lasted about 50 years, because you'll notice by the time the pandemic started, the rule was you could only buy oil all over the globe with a US dollar. That is starting to shift, and that's partly why we see such bad inflation. And there's a lot of information out there about that. I would heavily recommend doing searches on the Federal Reserve System and monetary policy and what's going on in America right now with housing and interest rates and rentals. It's not been good because our wages have not increased. There was stimulus sent to us, but that was only during the pandemic. So we haven't seen anything, I believe, since 21 or 22. Aid to families with dependent children. So that actually was one of the last welfare checks to come through. ADC was a federal state cash grant program that enabled states to aid the needy children without fathers, and also changed in 62 to aid families with dependent children. So up until you're 18 or even 22, if you're finishing college, now we allow people to stay on parents' insurances till 26. So we're kind of stretching that out. You see more folks living at home because of the cost of living increases. And then the aid to families with dependent children, welfare, there was FAP in 1969. So Family Assistance Plan, FAPing, provided the working poor with assistance and minimum incomes, and also replaced AFDC, old age assistance, aid to the disabled, and aid to the blind. So that is kind of what I wanted to start with today. I don't want to make these too long because I could certainly see you guys being busy in the summer. you can do searches when you have time, even from your phone. So just searching monetary policy, searching up inflation, cost of living, all the different terms that are hot button words right now. How much harder it is to get enough grain globally since the war in Ukraine. I know that's only a 2-year-old war, but that was the breadbasket of the world. So they finished with an old new path, the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act. It both abolished the AFDC program and then also gave states the authority to run their own welfare and work programs. So that is enough. Obviously, if you have questions in the meantime, um, feel free to contact me. But as mentioned before, the main things you're going to see is just go to course activities. You've got assignments and then discussions. And that's it. You'll have really announcements, assignments, discussions. Everything else, I know the class was imported kind of janky, or even go into grade. So you'll see what you're graded on. I think there is those 3 discussions. That's more for the attendance and yeah, for you to talk about what was discussed here. And then also the papers. So if you go in under assignments, when they're due, and then how to do them. It's the first one is due June 1st. So you have 11 days until that one, your social welfare topic paper that I reviewed early in class. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out and we'll see you all soon.